Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for today's webinar. We will be talking about how to modernize and mobilize your organization with Red River's Remote Workforce Assist. Today, we're coming to you live on Microsoft Teams live event and platform where we're going to be able to present it as well as answer Q&As throughout the presentation. In your right-hand bar, you'll see up top where you're able to interact with this conversation as we kind of present, and we can answer questions accordingly after the presentation. Today, we have Jason Waldrop, President of Managed Services, speaking to us about Remote Workforce Assist. Some key topics that he's going to be discussing is keeping your organization mobile and secure, tools to keep your organization remote, collaborative through Microsoft Teams, and more. So Jason, without an introduction, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Gary. And thanks for everybody for joining. So like Gary said, we're gonna talk a little bit about a topic that's been pretty hot amongst our clients, both clients that we've had for years as well as clients that have found us during this pandemic era here of new way of working and a new way of thinking about IT. So we've kind of assembled our thoughts around a lot of those active conversations and tried to distill them down into big themes. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. So obviously the big top theme here is remote workforce enablement, right? We all had to figure out how to go from showing up in the office every day, like I am today, to largely working from home almost overnight. So how do we do that? And we've kind of broken it into a few different categories here. We have to secure the access to the environment, and we live in a not necessarily a VPN-centric world anymore with the cloud, right? So how we secure access to various cloud resources is we got to think about that a little bit differently than we once did. Okay, securing the devices that folks are using to come into our environments and access our information. So we think about not just the laptop that we provided them from IT that's hardened and has all of our stuff on it, but maybe it's their home device, maybe it's a iOS device, an Apple or an iPad or an iPhone or an Android device or something like that. So how do we maintain the hygiene on those devices and allow our users to be productive at the same time? Then we think about the data itself. How do we secure the files and the documents that our users are accessing, right? So again, we kind of live in a not necessarily a VPN-centric world anymore. So the notion of securing the L drive or something like that is kind of old news. We have to think about embedding security in the documents themselves. So we'll talk about how we do that. And then finally, modern collaboration platforms like Microsoft Teams, Slack, like again, we're using Teams here today, have really been kind of the workhorse of this remote work productivity that we're all feeling. So we'll talk about that too. Okay, so let's jump into it here. This stuff is kind of old news at this point, but we really can't ignore the fact that remote work, telework, telecommute is just part of our world today, and will probably be part of our world forever, right? You can, whether you're reading the stories about what's happening in the commercial real estate markets, how folks are leaving cities and moving to the suburbs or even the exurbs. This thing has changed the way we think about work, largely because we've pulled it off, right? As a corporate community, we've been able to demonstrate that, hey, we can continue to be productive. And I know in our business, in certain aspects of our business, we're actually more productive, it turns out, working like this than we were asking folks to commute 2 hours each way, because we're in DC. Our service desk, for example, is largely in Washington, DC, where traffic is a bear, right? So we've proven we can do it. So now we've got to kind of embrace this thing, and it's So I'll just kind of jump in here. So we think about classic IT, where IT hands you your hardened laptop and says, this is your productivity device. We will image it once a year for you, and we have our PC refresh cycle, and there you go. And then we have modern IT, which is cloud and BYOD and all of those things. And so we don't think about this as a either or. We think about this as a both, right? We want to give the corporation that same sort of security and capabilities that we have with classic IT, but allow the modern IT work motions to happen through cloud and BYOD, and allow that to all happen securely and maintain these levels of productivity. So what does that look like? So again, we kind of break it down into three big themes here: securing access, securing devices, and securing the data. So when we think about securing access, again, in a VPN-less fashion now, multi-factor authentication becomes a mandatory thing. Risk-based conditional access, session-level inspection we'll talk about. Not all sessions are created the same, and we may need to treat certain access requests differently based on the context of a user's web session. And then we have seen a real demand for virtual desktop technology during this pandemic, and we'll talk about why and why we're seeing the demand, and also why now it's actually working, because we've been talking about virtual desktops for years, and for one reason or another, they have not been widely adopted. But now that the cloud has come into play, we're seeing these things really actually work and be meaningful parts of the IT strategy. Okay, in the middle here, securing devices. So traditional PC management, IT has kind of had that under control for a long time. Patch management, anti-malware platforms, and all that on our hardened Windows 10 machines. We know how to do that. Okay, but when we start to expand this into home machines, mobile devices, and all of that, now we need to think about broadening our approach to device security, and so that's MDM, mobile application management, and some other things we'll discuss. And then finally, the data itself, right? The most important, that is at the end of the day, that's our treasure. That's what all these other things are there to protect, is to make sure that our precious corporate intellectual property doesn't get destroyed on accident, wind up in the wrong hands. All those things that can be really devastating to a business. So there's a whole host of techniques that the cloud has brought along with it that we're going to talk about. This is things like, a lot of folks are using Office 365, so we're going to talk about some of the inherent things that we're enabling for our clients in that platform, just to table stakes out some of the security stuff there, ATP, data loss prevention, AIP. And then, we'll also talk about backup and DR, and specifically DR, because that has always been something that folks have wanted to do, but very like a small percentage of our customers would have typically implemented a true second site, hot site DR type strategy, because expensive and complex and all that. But again, common theme here, the cloud has brought with it some advantage, and now boards, especially in this environment, are saying, hey, let's dust off that DR plan and see what that thing looks like, and if there's some ways to modernize it. Okay, so we've been taking a lot of those calls and doing a lot of that work as well. All right, so I'm going to knock these down one at a time. So let's start with securing access. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have to think about contextual control or session level controls as we're making access decisions and granting access, okay, to a user. So what does that mean? Well, in the old days, somebody logs in behind the corporate firewall and you just let them do their thing, and that's great. Okay. Well, today, Gary Utley, who opened the call up here, there's a number of different versions of Gary Utley. Okay, when we think about it from an IT and access permissions perspective, right? We can be pretty sure it's Gary because he's given us his password and he's got his multi-factor authentication thing. So we're pretty certain that user that's trying to log in is actually Gary. Okay, because of multi-factor authentication, but there's a version of Gary or like me here today, I'm sitting behind the corporate firewall on my corporate provided laptop doing corporate things. Like, that's a pretty secure session, okay? But then there's also, could be Gary at an open internet kiosk in a hostile foreign nation, okay? So we may treat that session differently, or on a home machine that we detect hasn't been patched in 3 years, okay? And if Gary's trying to access sensitive customer information, we may not let that go. So the idea is thinking about the user and what the user has access to, and then marrying that up with the attributes or the context of the session in which they're accessing this information, and then making access decisions like you see on the right, okay? So this is just kind of a simple little example here. We've got a user coming in, we validate that user through multi-factor authentication, we know it is Gary, okay? Now we're gonna look at this session based on where in the world it is. Okay, is it in a corporate network? Is it here? Is it someplace that we see Gary a lot? Gary lives in Raleigh. This is Gary coming from Raleigh. Okay, we know that's probably pretty clean. If Gary logged in Raleigh 2 hours ago, but all of a sudden Gary's logging in from Seattle, well, that's impossible travel. We're going to flag that and maybe shut that session down, right? That means somehow he's been compromised, right? So we're going to inspect it on location. We're going to look at the state of the device that Gary's accessing the network from. So is this device, what's the hygiene of this device? Has it been patched recently? Does it have malware? All of those things, okay? What group does Gary belong to? Is he an IT admin? Is he a senior executive? Does he have access to very, highly classified information inside the company? Okay, and that may inform how we treat this session. And then finally, there is a Microsoft, if you're using the Microsoft solution here, they have their collective risk assessment that'll give you kind of a risk score for this session that'll do things like go and see if this user's creds have been found on the dark web and a number of other things like that that'll just kind of be one more data point to then decide, are we going to let this through? Should we prompt for another MFA? Okay. Or should we maybe kill the account and force a password reset, something like that? Okay. So that's sort of the idea of securing access. Okay. I also mentioned virtual desktops have been a really hot topic here during the pandemic. Virtual desktops for years have been something we've discussed with clients, but it often involved like buying a ton of hardware and to host these virtual desktops, both storage and compute. Fairly complex administration of the virtual desktops themselves, and there's always problems with things like printing and if you wanted to use your soft phone or video conference through them, forget it. There was always all these issues, okay? But today, the hyperscale cloud providers all have virtual desktop platforms on there that just, in many ways, eliminate a lot of those problems, okay? So we've seen there's a technological foundational reason why virtual desktops are kind of having a renaissance right now, because they actually work. Okay, we can deploy them relatively quickly in the cloud. The things like video and voice work and printing works, and then you don't have to go through that whole mess of standing up data centers full of hardware and an army of IT guys to babysit that stuff. The cloud kind of addresses that. Okay, so you think about not just like the flexible and remote workforce requirements here. That what it allows for that is real obvious, right? We had 1,000 users just stop working in the office and go home. We're going to be having people on a lot of different home machines and stuff that we don't know the state of and their trust. If we just deliver them a remote desktop and secure that, we don't really necessarily care what machine they're connecting from, because we're controlling the session itself through the virtual desktop. We're controlling all the applications on there. It's a very easy, clean experience for that end user. Okay, but then there's all these other reasons. I mean, so that's been the prominent the remote work from home obviously has been the 80% of the use cases that we've been getting called for. But even prior to this, a lot of healthcare, right? Serving up the EMR application and all that to docs in the treatment room on a tablet. Like those are maybe bank tellers is another example that comes to mind. Credit union tellers. That those types of applications getting served up through this desktop virtualization platforms are becoming very, very popular. So we've spun up some managed services around this because I mentioned a lot of that. The cloud has eliminated a lot of the complexity around hardware management, but there's still, like, the cloud brings with it some other complexities, right? Like, you want to be really managing the performance and the cost of the cloud resources that you're using, right? So I'll just pick on Azure for a second. If you, depending on what Microsoft Office 365 licensing you have, you may already be entitled to Windows Virtual Desktop on the Azure platform. You likely are. Okay, so all you have to pay for is the compute. Well, that can be pretty doggone expensive. If it's not managed properly. So we have a software overlay that we put in front of the virtual desktop environment that allows us to do, like, handle auto scaling, for example. So we know that we'll always have a hot server, so to speak, ready to take connections, but we're not going to start scaling up till like 8:30 in the morning when we see people start coming online. And by 8 o'clock at night, we're going to scale that thing back down. Literally cost management, kind of hour by hour is how, and that has to be done through automation and logic and all this other stuff that this platform that we have, that we put in front for our clients, and we manage all of that for our clients. And then there's a whole host of other things like dealing with just dedicated machines and pooled machines and assignments, move that and changes, and just general tech support. So it literally really is a turnkey service that we deliver to our clients, and it's been very successful. I expect this to become kind of a mainstream part of how folks think about the modern desktop. Okay, all right. So we talked about securing access. Now we'll talk about securing devices. Really, two big things here: mobile device management. What is that? Okay, so while we think of everything, we think of a Windows 10 laptop as a mobile device, right? And look, we've always known well how to manage laptops and patch management and anti-malware and all the things I mentioned earlier. But now, these all of these cloud applications can be deployed across a multitude of iOS, Android, you name it, and that's great for the business and for the users, because I'll take my personal example. I've got 3 kids, and my youngest plays a lot of baseball, and I coach some of his teams, and so I'm able to be on the baseball field, be present in his life, and still be in touch with my business through my phone or my iPad or whatever. Okay, but when we travel to a tournament we have to stay overnight or something, he might take my iPad that has all my work stuff on it and play Fortnite on that thing. So I want to make sure that that he's not able to get into my stuff. And so the way we do that is we look at the device itself, we make sure it's not jailbroken, we can restrict camera and mic use, we'll enforce minimum levels of OS on these things, and make sure that device is ready to handle the applications. Okay, and then from a mobile application management perspective, we do things like we control the versions. So we don't allow our users to just go to the App Store and download Word on their own, right? If they try that, that's great, but the device will see, oh, hey, that's a company managed application. It'll put the appropriate version of that with our controls, our policies, our application encryption policies, and all of those things in there. We'll make sure that people can't get into the example I just used for my son playing Fortnite. If he was to try and accidentally click on my OneDrive application or something, it would prompt for a thumbprint or an access code or something that would just not allow him to get inadvertently into my work stuff. Okay, and then of course this also allows us to do application level wiping of the device. So if somebody loses their device, leaves it on an airplane, whatever, or they leave the organization, we can wipe the device clean of any corporate stuff while leaving their Facebook and their photos and all that alone. Okay, so those are critical concepts for securing that device experience. Okay, and then finally, securing data. All right, so as I mentioned before, we're kind of while we still have the L drive or the N drive, and there's some inherent security built in there, the real modern thinking is around securing the documents themselves and thinking about how documents move around and how malware infects environments and things. So we're just going to pick off a couple of big ideas that we talk to the 80% of our clients. There's nuance galore when it comes to this stuff, but we just picked a couple of big themes. And if you wanted to follow up with us and go deep on any of this or any of the other more nuanced or esoteric stuff, happy to do that. Okay, so again, we'll talk a little bit about some of the Office 365 capabilities, because most clients are either in Office 365 or on their way into Office 365, and with good reason. Many of these security solutions are part of those good reasons. So when we think about ATP, okay, two big things that ATP does are and that's ATP is called Advanced Threat Protection. There's two big components to it, many components, but two ones that are easy to grasp: safe links and safe attachments. All right. Something I saw some statistic. It's like 80% of the malware that comes into an organization comes in through email in the form of either a bad attachment or a link that people click in email. Okay, so what if we could? We've trained our users. We do all the things we're supposed to do. We have anti-malware on our laptops in case they click on something bad. We hope that protects it. But what if we could actually, when that user clicks on that attachment or that link, if we could put it over in a sandbox, open it up, inspect it. Hey, is this clean or bad? If it's clean, pass that section along to the user. If it's bad, just detonate it, tell the user, hey, this thing was infected, let IT know, and it never got onto the network. That is what's safe. That's the concept behind safe links and safe attachments. Okay, so that's all part of the Office 365 ATP work that we're doing for our clients, and happy to follow up in way more detail than those just big concepts. Okay, same thing here. DLP, data loss prevention. Okay, so there's this is another big hairy topic, okay, that we're just going to kind of just introduce here and talk about what we're doing for a lot of our clients here. Data loss prevention, it's not always about just trying to detect like malicious exfils of corporate secrets. While it does that, and that's a very important aspect of it, a lot of it is just really making sure that our users don't make mistakes, and that, you know, in this heavy compliance world we live in, we want to make sure we're not accidentally exposing ourselves to a HIPAA or a PCI violation or a GDPR issue or something like that, right? So while yes, we want to identify unusual user behavior, somebody downloading 3 gigs of data at 2 in the morning to a USB drive that they would normally do, that, okay, we want to throw an alarm on that for sure. But we're also looking for like, hey, this file has bank account information. Are you sure you want to email that? And if you do, maybe we should encrypt it, things like that. Okay, so that's sort of the why people think about DLP. Not to mention, again, this information is now present on, or is now made available VPN-less to a multitude of devices. So we have to embed this stuff in the cloud to make sure that before it goes out, certain rules and corporate policies are respected. All right. So how do we do this? Well, it starts by sort of discovering and labeling your data, understanding your data, okay? And then building out a set of corporate policies, and these things, that's often where the hard work is, okay? So like, how do and we can put watermarks on documents, for example. So this is a finance watermark or a corporate watermark. So think of it like top secret, secret, confidential, you know, however, if you've lived in that world, kind of, you've seen these watermarks, and basically we set those same type of things up for corporations, and then from there we build policies so that as this data moves around our cloud, or potentially tries to get moved outside of the cloud by either a user copying something from, let's say, OneDrive, trying to make a copy from their OneDrive to a Dropbox, are we going to allow that? Okay, maybe not with certain types of data if it's modeled, if it's labeled a certain way, or I'm trying to email this out, that type of thing. It even goes as far as to say, we're in this Teams meeting right here, and I'm on the meeting with Gary, and I'm an executive in the managed service organization. Gary's over in marketing. If we have a device that's tagged managed services only, and I go to present it and share it inadvertently on my screen for all the folks that are in the web meeting, Gary will just see a black screen because he's not allowed to see that document. So it can get pretty nuanced. So tons of ways to deal with enforcement, right? And we can, know this is not just like a Microsoft specific thing. We can use these techniques across Dropbox, Box.com, Salesforce. Like this thing can reach into most of the prevalent places where folks are going to store and use documents. Okay, we can limit the scope to certain users or groups. Like there's a customer that comes to mind that just got a grant from the NIH, and this project they're working on has some PHI in it, so they're concerned about HIPAA. So we just built a simple little Teams site, and only that site and the users that are using that data are going to have this level of DLP enforcement, because the rest of their data doesn't need it. Okay, so lots of things we can do here. We can notify the users when they do something wrong. We can send an alert to IT. We can actually automatically just encrypt an email that's going out that has PHI in it, for example. A lot of things we can do with those policies. It's kind of limitless. We show up with some good ideas, but it takes a fair bit of thinking on the business's part as to how they want to make this work. Okay, and then kind of last thing on this subject is this notion of data loss prevention, data protection, all this stuff we've been talking about here goes hand in hand with governance. I've probably said HIPAA, PCI, GDPR a number of times already through this. So think about, this is sort of an automated way to deal with some of those things that used to require real heavy security artillery and expensive software to do. So We discover, classify, and label our documents. We label them for both sensitivity. Is this, highly secret to the company or open to everybody? And then also for retention, so our document retention policies are respected. And then once we enable all that, the system constantly monitors and might tell IT, hey, we just had a user do something you should look at, or might automatically encrypt that email on the way out the door or block it, or any of those things we've discussed. So data loss prevention, data protection, they go hand in hand with governance, okay? All right, business continuity. So I mentioned there's been a handful of hot topics. This is definitely one, okay, that folks have been calling us about. So historically, we've thought about sort of data protection, BC, DR, in 3 buckets. Backup, okay, everybody's got backups. We know what those are, okay. High availability, that's really what virtualization, when the whole virtualization wave of IT came along, high availability really was one of the big drivers that drove a lot of the adoption of virtualization. So we could lose a physical server and the business would still operate and nobody would know the difference, okay? Disaster recovery is one that has historically been pretty expensive and complex, so not everybody has been able to do it, despite everybody knowing you need all 3. Disaster recovery means what happens if my primary data center, so high availability takes care of, we lose a server, we lose a handful of, some storage here and there, whatever. But if we lose a data center, plane strikes a data center, something like that, okay? How do we recover from that? That's what disaster recovery is really all about. And it's been a challenge, a real challenge for real reasons to businesses over time. One, cost, because historically the only way to do this was to build a second data center, okay? So you needed twice as much data center IT and real estate and all of that, and then additional networking expense, and it's complex, right? So the team now has 2 environments they're monitoring and dealing with, okay? And then, maintaining compliance is complicated enough at one data center. Trying to run it across multiple data centers, it just becomes orders of magnitude more complex as we add this stuff up, okay? Well then, so what that meant historically was our clients, only our clients that had the budget really and the real business must-have business need to do it, did it. But what we're seeing that change now is because the cloud allows this to be done in a less costly, less complex way, and you get all the compliance benefits that go along with being in one of the hyperscale clouds. I'm going to pick on Azure here, okay? But if you think about how Azure Site Recovery works, okay, you don't have to buy any additional hardware or data center space. There's no secondary site. It's just the cloud. You only pay for the compute and storage that you're using, okay, and plus $25 a month for the replication fee. So it is really inexpensive relative to what it's been historically, okay? Same thing on I'm not suggesting this is not complex, because it is. When you need to fail over from production to DR, there's all kinds of DNS stuff that's got to happen, and this stuff needs to be tested periodically. So I'm not trying to minimize the significance that's still involved with operating one of these environments, but it is considerably less complex than it was when we had to have a second data center, second set of storage, second set of servers, running VMware SRM or Zerto or one of these. Like, this is considerably less complex than it was, okay? And then of course, getting all the compliance stuff that's just inherent to these cloud services is a huge benefit to not only running production in the cloud, but also running DR in the cloud. Okay, so what's this look like? Just real quick, kind of easy picture description here. So what I'm showing you here is just a simple like web workload. So we've got Apache running on PHP over SQL on top of VMware. So what we do here is we enable Azure Site Recovery basically by kind of getting these workloads replicated to Azure, okay, and I'll spare you the details of all of that, but what is in location A is now up in Azure, okay, then we power those things off and just do a continual replication, and then if we have a really bad day in production, we can say, oh, we need time to turn on DR, okay, and all that DNS stuff happens, that automated runbook and all those things that we're accustomed to with SRM and stuff, all kick in, and work, and we can fail back just the same. Okay, so happy to, again, that's a very simple depiction of there's a lot of moving parts there, but we have a whole playbook that we help our customers with, and we can provide all the ongoing management to include periodic DR, actual activations and testing and things like that. So let us know if you want a follow up there. We're seeing a lot of activity in that space. Okay, last but not least, this, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I'm on one back-to-back video call after another these days. And what would we have done without Microsoft Teams during this, or if you're a Slack user or whatever? But Teams seems to be really dominating. This is November of last year. Teams was, very public about, hey, we passed 20 million daily users, and we're starting to beat up on Slack a little bit. Well, in April, we're at 75 million daily active users of Teams. Okay, 75 million, and that's in April. That's months ago. So, I mean, who knows what it is now? And there's real reasons for it. If you're not familiar with Teams, again, this is just going to be a very high level cursory overview, but it becomes the hub of how you work. I know in my daily activities, I have two applications up for the most part, Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Outlook. Other than that, if I'm in an Excel document or PowerPoint, great, but that's all I need to work, right? And so when we think about the functions that Teams provides, there's really, we talk to our clients about three pieces: collaboration, meetings, and calling. Okay, so when we think about collaboration, we're really thinking about chat, Teams, channels, file sharing, that type of thing. So if you haven't been in Teams, it's just an easy little screenshot. You see that demo team there. There's a few different channels associated with that. There are members of these teams. So if there's a sales engineer, or maybe this demo team is working on a new demo that we're building. So we could have this demo channel only has the 6 or 7 people that are working on this. There's a persistent chat that you see going on here. We can have centralized file storage for this demo that we're working on. So now I don't have to hunt around the network drive wondering where it is. I just go to the team that was working on this. Real popular for if you're working on things like working on RFPs or grants or something like that, or if you're in the deal space, M&A guys. This is a real popular application. It's the use cases are endless. Okay, and so this is why there's been so much adoption of Teams in this pandemic environment. Then we have the meetings experience, and we're on a live event now. This isn't exactly a meeting. This is more of a what we characterize as like a webinar type setting, but Teams has that part of the platform. The vast majority of stuff you do on Teams is these web meetings, right? And if you haven't, there's Gary and Corinne and Frank in a meeting, okay? And you can share your screen, you can blur your background, you can put on cool pictures and all kinds of stuff. I'm sure everybody on the call has been through a million of these now, so I won't belabor it. But a couple of interesting things that you might not know. Real soon, direct guest join for Zoom and WebEx is going to be part of the Teams meeting room experience. So when we ever get back to meetings in rooms, right? We've already been able to set up for our clients. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, that's an MX800 from Cisco in a Microsoft Teams meeting. Okay. We have Polycom Real Connect. We know how to make all that where we can join a Cisco device to a Teams meeting and vice versa. Okay. What Microsoft is doing is they're now going to allow these center of table devices to join not just Teams meetings, but also Zoom and WebExes, which is huge. This is going to democratize the room experience to the extent that we ever get together and meet in rooms again. Okay. And then these are the Microsoft Whiteboard. That's a function of the Teams environment. Is really cool. I used it this morning. In fact, we had one of these Surface hubs that you see in the middle here on some casters. I had a small meeting that had about 15 people in it or so, but there was only 3 or 4 of us here in the office. So we used this guy, put the whiteboard function up, and just whiteboard it with the meeting was very. It was one of those meetings where a whiteboard was necessary, and so all the folks all over the country that were a part of this could see what we were putting in the whiteboard, annotate it themselves, and then we could all save it down and put it in our OneDrive and continue to collaborate. So kind of a neat little function, right? So just one more way that this new way that we work that's going to forever change the way we think about working, technology is going to enable that. Technologies like this are going to continue to enable it, okay? And then calling, of course, Microsoft Teams can be a phone system, right? So you plug your headset in or just go on a speaker puck or something and off you go. It's your phone, it's your corporate phone system. So tons more. We could do a full hour just on Teams calling, for example, and the features associated with it and how to configure it with your Cisco and all that. So happy to do a follow-up for those that are interested there. All right. And then just here in closing, I just kind of want to, for those of you who are clients, current clients, you've seen this digital transformation journey that we have been messaging for quite some time now to you guys for the last few years. This journey evolves as new services roll out. Okay, I just kind of wanted to point out that this remote, our clients that we've been taking on this journey, when COVID hit, didn't miss a beat, because much of the stuff that I talked about today was already a part of this journey we were working on. So, you know, we were building this not with the idea that a pandemic was right around the corner. Okay, we were building this with the idea that, hey, this is the modern way people are working, right? Folks are at soccer games, running their business and coaching a team. Okay, people are going to work from home for a whole bunch of different reasons, whether it's work-life balance, whether it's the businesses trying to find lower cost labor in markets that are, you know, not New York, Washington, Chicago, LA, all a bunch of reasons why, you know, remote work was becoming a real thing. And then also the security theme is consistent and runs horizontal through every conversation that we have, right? And productivity and collab and video and meetings, and this stuff just runs horizontal through everything we do. So the point I'm making here is these much of what we discussed today was part of this overall digital transformation messaging that we've been delivering. So if you're a client, you've seen this, and now you can kind of get a sense for, you know, the benefit of this journey. If you're new to Red River, love to have this conversation with you and show you what we're doing for our folks. And then I guess finally here, I just want to kind of put a plug in. So Red River is a fast track partner of Microsoft's, which is a big deal for you, the client. Okay, so there's only about 60 or 70 fast track partners in the U.S. only, and if you're a public sector, if you're out there and you're a public sector customer, we do a good bit of public sector business here at Red River. There's only 6 of us that can do fast track for public sector. So what this is, these are funds that if you're eligible, and most of the folks that we work with would be eligible, these are funds that Microsoft sets aside for partners like Red River that have the capabilities that we do. We can go acquire funds for you from Microsoft to help with the planning and adoption of these cloud services. So it doesn't offset the entire migration expense by any means, but in some cases, this is real money we're talking about here. Okay, so we have a whole team of people that does nothing but fast track here at Red River and helps our clients go out and maximize their fast track benefit with Microsoft. And so if any of this stuff we've talked about is interesting to you, but you haven't yet adopted it or anything, just know there is very likely some funding available that we can get for the planning, onboarding, and adoption of these services. So Gary, with that, I'll take a breath and take a sip of water and turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Really in depth about how organizations can really get their users and organizations secure while working remote, and also showcasing all the tools that are available that we kind of help out with organizations. We do have a few questions. One of them actually got answered middle of the presentation. They were asking, what are some of the Microsoft what are some voice solutions for working for a remote workforce? Obviously, we have Microsoft Teams as a powerhouse that we kind of support and push out there. The second one was, what do you recommend?
Hey, Gary, let me just interrupt there briefly too.
Yeah.
So we also have, so in addition to Microsoft, we do a ton of Cisco cloud-based Cisco calling. So I know people often think of Cisco as a premise-based. We got to go install this gear in your racks to make it work. Okay, Cisco now has some really robust cloud calling features that allow you to consume your PBX services, and then we bundle local and LD in a per user per month format. So Microsoft or Cisco, really, Gary, Red River can help with both.
Right. Okay. Yeah. We're a powerhouse for all, right? So the question that we had around kind of the security was, what do you recommend for employees using for security training?
Yeah. So we have this thing we call Cloud Assist Security Foundation. So a different way people like, I'll answer the question directly here in a second, but kind of a more broad question that I get a lot is, look, Jason, we can spend our entire IT budget on cyber. We all know that, okay? So if we have to prioritize, what's the most pragmatic approach to my cyber spend, okay? So the way that I think about it is the number one issue for most businesses, big and small, is malware, ransomware, right? So the step one is, let's get a good anti-malware, anti-ransomware strategy in place. So we built this thing called Cloud Assist Security Foundations. That's what we call a 3+1 approach. The +1 is a next-gen firewall that does, that inspects up and down all 7 layers of the OSI stack, because a lot of the attacks today, as we discussed earlier, a lot of the attacks today don't just come in, as some sort of they come in looking like HTTP or HTTPS, so we have to inspect at that level, okay? So next-gen firewall is a must, and then the 3 of the 3+1 is really a very strong AI and machine learning based anti-malware platform that lives on the desktop itself. So there's a couple of those out there that we use in this strategy. Then we want to prevent the attack as early in the attack chain as possible, and that's at the DNS resolution. So we like to use a Cisco Umbrella, formerly OpenDNS, so that when a user goes and clicks on potentially a bad link, it gets caught out there in the cloud at DNS resolution before that session even gets returned, right? So I'm sitting there, somebody sent me a bad link, maybe it gets through Microsoft ATP and all of our other stuff. If I click on that link and Cisco knows it's a bad link, it'll stop that transaction, okay? And then the third part of the 3+1 strategy is what this question is really about, and that's what we call security awareness training, okay? So this is making sure our users know how, what to look for in a suspicious email, when to talk to IT before I click, and all that. So we bundle KnowBefore into that Cloud Assist Security Foundations package, and we manage the KnowBefore experience. So what that means is, yes, there's a whole library of online trainings, and we work with the client's HR department to be a part of their onboarding when they get a new hire, maybe annual recertification, all that, that integrates with their learning management system. But then, more as important, we're going to proactively phish the company. We're going to send 2 or 3 times a month phishing emails into the company and monitor who's clicking, who might need more training. We'll do things like current events, maybe an Amazon gift card, or sometimes even a spear phishing thing that looks like it's coming from the CEO, and get clever, see how far we can get. Can we get people all the way to give us their Office 365 creds, for example? And then we'll report that back to the business, and we can look at folks who maybe need more training and send them through some more programs. So security awareness training is a huge part of the bigger, broader anti-malware strategy that we roll out for our clients.
Perfect. Couldn't said it better. Well, guys, that's all the questions that we have for today. Jason, we really appreciate you coming on, kind of giving us the whole plethora of how organizations can stay remote and secure. I do want to send out a reminder, this Thursday, July 23rd at 11 a.m., we do have another webinar about how IT managed services can fit into your organization, kind of giving a whole breadth of how Red River's managed services can really fit in any organization out there. So we'd like to invite you there. We will be following up with an email with a recording of this webinar, as well as information to, if you have any more questions or like to get in contact with us, we'll be sure to push that out in that email. Once again, thank you again for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.